And so I want to drill down in this, but before I do that, I want to just make sure we get kind of the bigger context of where Mark is kind of going as he's telling these stories. You know, one of the ways that kind of gets us into trouble as Westerners is that we're very chronological people. We want everything to be in order, everything to be kind of linear, one thing to flow after another. And that is not how the biblical authors write, because they're less concerned about chronology, which is very important to us, and they're more concerned about communicating truth by the way they arrange events so that things will stand out to us a lot more. And so you'll read one gospel, and this happens after this, and where the next one, like, well, that's a different order. They're not concerned with that. There was an order they happened in real history, but that's not what's going to highlight the truth that the author wants to bring out. And so in these stories, Mark kind of puts these three stories, the one that follows this that we won't get to tonight, together, and they all kind of are focusing around the same question that was posed at the end of the section we read last week, which is Jesus calms the storm, it stops instantaneously, and then they ask the question, who is this? Who is this man who even the wind and the waves obey him? And so then Mark's kind of asking this question continually, because if you thought that was disturbing, this man in your boat who can control the storm, what about this next story where he heals this demon-possessed man? And while Jesus is actually already, there's a story that Mark's already shared where he's cast out an evil spirit. This is pretty routine for Jesus, but there's something unique about this story, and we'll dig into it a little bit more in a minute. But as you listen and pay attention as I read, this man is possessed with many demons. This is not one-to-one, man-to-man combat, if you want to picture it that way, where he casts out a single demon. Rather, Jesus is clearly outnumbered here. There are many demons in this man. They go by the name of Legion, and he casts them out. And it leaves you asking the question again, who is this man that not only can calm the wind and the waves, but also can cast out a multitude of demons that have possessed a single man? And then in the next story that we won't get to, Jesus heals a woman who's been bleeding for a long time, but then he gets to the end of the story where he raises a little girl back from the dead. Jairus, the synagogue ruler, his daughter has fallen dead, and he raises her to life again, and we're left again with that question, who is this man? Because that is the point of the gospel narratives, for us to focus in and go, who is this man? Who is Jesus? Who is this man who is coming in and not just teaching with incredible authority, but is doing miracles that we have never seen before? He is showing authority and power over the creation, over the spiritual forces of evil, over sickness and death. He is showing his power over everything. Who is this man? And that message is coming out and lets us know that Jesus, as this demon testifies here, he is the Son of the God, the Son of Most High. God has come in the flesh, that he is among us. He is the image of the invisible God, he says in Colossians. The fullness of the deity God was pleased to have dwell in him. Philippians, Paul writes and says, he who being in very nature God did not consider equality with God as something to be grasped, but took on the form of a servant, being found in the appearance of man and the likeness of a human. He humbled himself to become obedient to death. John says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word was with God in the beginning, and the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. And we have seen the glory, his glory, the glory of the one and only who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. No one has ever seen God, but God, the one and only who sits at the Father's side, has made him known. Over and over again, this is the message. This is God amongst us. Emmanuel, God with us. And so that's always this big picture narrative that Mark and the other gospel writers are saying, hey, who is this man? Who is Jesus? And pointing him out to him. So that's the big context of where this falls in this narrative. But I want to drill down a little bit more into this story and look and learn a little something about prayer through this process, through this story. So in this story, there are three different either groups or individuals who make requests of Jesus. If Jesus is God in the flesh, then we can call that prayer, right? If you're asking something of deity, then that would be considered prayer, although that might make you a little bit uncomfortable when the first request comes from a legion of demons. But this request is made of Jesus. And so that's the first place it's found, is that legion, this multitude of demons. And the word legion in Jesus' day, a Roman legion, a battery of soldiers, was somewhere between 5,000 to 6,000 soldiers. The numbers kind of varied. It's never very precise. Is that exactly what he's talking about here? Are there 5,000 or 6,000 demons in this man? I have no idea. Maybe, because in just a few more verses, we'll find that there are 2,000 pigs that are possessed and ran into the lake. And, I don't think that one demon possessed two different pigs. I think those are at least an individual one per. And so this man is swarming with demons. This legion, this multitude of demons, makes a request of Jesus. In fact, he actually makes 3 requests of Jesus. First, he says, don't torture me. Then he says, don't send me out of the area. And then he says, send us into these pigs. All right, so these requests are made, first of all, by legion, by this battery of demons here. Second request comes from the village people. All right, we've got the people tending the pigs. They see what happens. They run into the village. They tell them. The village people hightail it over from the YMCA, and they come and see what's happening. Nobody? Come on. Village people? YMCA? Man, y'all going to miss some other details in this. I'm going to pick up on that, all right? So the village people, they come in, and what do they ask Jesus? They say, leave our region. That's their request. That's their prayer. And then lastly, the former demoniac, this man who is now clothed, sitting at the feet of Jesus in his right mind. And he asks Jesus if he can come along with Jesus, if he can physically follow him, if he can get in the boat and leave with Jesus. And these aren't just casual requests that these different parties make. And there is passion. There is deep sincerity with these, because look at the verbs, look at the action words that are involved in how these things are described. For Legion, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He asked him to swear to God that he won't torture him. He says he begged Jesus again and again not to send him out of the area. Begged Jesus to send him among the pigs. He's begging. He's pleading. He's falling on his knees. This is a passionate request. The same is true for the village people. The people began to plead in verse 17 for him to leave their region. They're begging. They're asking him. They are afraid. They're saying, get away. Would you please just leave us? And then even the man that has been freed of the legion of demons in verse 18 says the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. So there is great passion in these requests. And so they really all come on the same level. All right? They're all being asked of Jesus, and they are all being asked with a great amount of passion, with great sincerity when they're pursuing these requests. So let's look at the answers, because I think here in the answers is where things get pretty interesting. What are the answers that Jesus gives to these 3 different requests? Well, to Legion, the battery of demons here, he gets what he asked for. His prayer, if you will, if you can handle that request of Jesus, is answered. He doesn't get tortured. He doesn't get sent out of the region, and he is allowed to go into the pigs as requested. Right? So he gets what he asked for. The village people, they get what they asked for? Yeah, they do. They ask Jesus to leave. The next verse is Jesus gets in the boat and leaves. And then we come to the demon-possessed man, the one man in the story that we're going, he's just been cleansed of thousands of demons. He's in his right mind. He's sitting at the feet of Jesus. This is a man who has now found Jesus as being the center of what he wants to focus his attention on. And when he asks Jesus for something, he's told no. He's told, no, I want you to stay here, something else. So if we just take those answers on the surface, it kind of gets a little confusing. I think it's a pretty natural human instinct for us to go, when I ask for something of anybody, whether it be God, my boss, my wife, your parents, whoever, if you make a request of someone, you're making a request that you want, that you think is going to be good for you. Whether in the short term or in the long run, you think, hey, this is something I want. And so that's the reason I'm asking for it, because I want it to come to pass. And so when you ask for that and you want it and you're not given it, it feels like the person who has the ability to give it and does not, that they don't want what's best for you. That would be our natural human thinking, because I want what's best for me. I'm looking out for me. This is what's best for me, and you're telling me no, so you must not want what is best for me. And if we approach and just look at these answers and think of that way, we go, well, I guess Jesus wanted what was best for Legion and the village people who didn't want him, and for this man who's been possessed, he didn't want what's best for him. But obviously we know that is not true. But when it comes to making requests, when it comes to making prayers, I think that's how we approach it. We think we know what is best for us and what we want. But let's look a little deeper at these answers to these prayers, at how Jesus responded to these. So Legion, he got what he asked for. But the end result of his request was destruction. Go into these pigs, they run down the hillside mad and crazy, and they drown. Now, I'm by no means an expert in demonology, nor do I think any of us should pursue that endeavor. But if I can just take a few things from this text to learn some observations, I would go based on this legion of demons, based on their request. They really didn't want to be tortured, which that makes sense. But they also didn't really want to get sent out of the area. And they begged to go into something else. To something else alive. To these pigs. Now, I'm thinking like, well, couldn't they just, jumped on and possessed some of these disciples standing around, maybe the pig herders? For some reason, they could not do that. For some reason, they needed authority, and they thought their best shot were these other living animals over here. Because apparently, to not be inside of something that they could possess, some sort of host, is apparently a really bad thing. I don't know why. I don't think it matters why. But it's pretty obvious that is a very unfavorable thing. And so they got what they wanted, but their end result was the thing that they possessed was now dead. And so now they were left in the place that they ultimately did not want to be, which was without being able to possess someone. It led them to destruction. So really, in Jesus giving them what they want, Jesus was showing his wrath, not his grace. Because he knew what the outcome was going to be and said, if that's what you want, then you can have that, because that will actually lead to something that you do not want. Same thing for the village people, right? They come to him and they say, leave us. This is too much for us. This man has been out here. He has been possessed, chained up, doing horrific things for God knows how long. They've been afraid of him. So maybe their assumption is that you would show, just like the Pharisees accused him of, if you have authority over the demons, then you must be Beelzebub and be able to have that. Jesus, of course, says, a house divided against itself cannot stand. But maybe that's what they're thinking. They're just saying, your power is too great, it's too unknown, please leave. Does he show them grace? Or does he show them wrath? Because what are they really asking? They're asking that the light of the world, their Redeemer, their Savior, God in the flesh, to leave their presence. He has come to their shoreline. He is ready to preach, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is near. He is coming in this area called the Decapolis, which means 10 cities, which sometimes it was 10 cities, sometimes it was 8, sometimes 12, depends on what it was. But it's this group of cities mostly comprised of Gentiles and some Jews. These are people that Jesus is not normally going to. But he makes this effort, fights through a storm to get there, to bring this message, to heal this man, and they say, go away. So ultimately what they are asking upon themselves is, we don't want God. Which obviously for any person across any time in history is not good. So by him giving them what they want, it's actually an expression of God's wrath. In Romans chapter 1, I won't read this whole section in verses 18 through 32. If you're not familiar with it, you should read it. But Paul says this. I'll just read a couple key verses in here. He says, the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of men who suppress the truth. Furthermore, since they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, he gave them over to a depraved mind to do what ought not to be done. There's a whole lot of other verses in that section, but what Paul is getting at is he says, look, God's wrath is being poured out. Now, typically when we think about God's wrath, we probably have images of, natural disasters that occur, in volcanoes and earthquakes and tsunamis or something like that is going on. Or maybe it's, something like the plagues that fall on Egypt and pestilence and all these things that come down in that kind of form. Or maybe we're fast forwarding to the book of Revelation and thinking about God's wrath being poured out in all those kind of ways and all those crazy judgments that happen there. And that's what we usually think. But Paul says, hey, those certainly can be expressions of God's wrath and have been. But God's wrath also comes in another form. It comes when people do not think it is worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, when they find it better to worship not the Creator, but to worship created things instead, and that He pours out His wrath by saying, you don't want to have anything to do with me? Then fine, don't have anything to do with me. I'll take my hands off the reins, and you can do whatever you want to do. And that is His wrath. Because when we are left to our own devices, when we do whatever we want to do, what is left is hell. That's what we create for ourselves. That's the end of that path. When we get to go our own way and do whatever we want, that is actually God's wrath. We think it is some exercise of freedom. If I get to do whatever I want, that's the definition of freedom. Do what I want to do. That's freedom. No, that's bondage. That's bondage to your desires. That's bondage to every kind of whim you have. That's bondage to all the consequences that will naturally flow from that, because it's contrary to how God has set up His creation to operate. In the story of Exodus, of the deliverance of the Israelites, there's a phrase that's often repeated that we're probably familiar with, where it says that God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Actually, in the first 5 plagues, it says that Pharaoh's heart was hardened. And then on plague 6 and on, it starts to talk about God hardening his heart. Paul talks about this in Romans 9 as well. And so when we typically think of God hardening his heart, hardening Pharaoh's heart, or anybody else's for that matter, the image that comes to mind is that Pharaoh did not have a choice, that God forced upon him to do something he did not want to do, that he was hardened towards that, and so God made him do that. And so it can kind of create a little bit of sympathy. You go, wow, that kind of stinks for him. He had no choice. The Hebrew word there is hazak. And this word hazak actually is mostly translated as strengthened. And so really the idea there is that Pharaoh's heart, which is why it says this in the first 5 plagues, was already set towards this course. He already had no interest in freeing the Israelites. He had no interest in bowing a knee to the God of the Israelites. He had no interest in caring for the people of Egypt as they were getting destroyed by these plagues. He had one interest, and that was himself, that he had set himself up as God. He was worshiping created things instead of the Creator. He did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God. And so the idea is that God strengthened his heart in the position that it was already in. He said, if that's what you want to do, if you won't respond to these things, then I'm going to make sure you have the strength to stay the course of what your heart wants to do. And you will do that, and that will be the experience of my wrath, because you will do all that you want to do, and it will bring absolute destruction to you and to everybody else that you lead. And so back to our story with this legion of demons to these village people, he says yes to their requests, but it is really a form of his wrath. It is not a form of grace by answering their requests, because they are getting what they want, and what they want is leading to destruction. And then we come to the last request, to the former demoniac. And so what he asks this question, and we read that and we go, what he wants seems to be something that's good. He wants to follow Jesus. Like, that seems like a really good, holy, in line with God's will type of request. But Jesus says no. But he didn't just leave it at no. He tells him, go home to your family, tell them how much the Lord has done for you and the mercy that he has shown you. Which is pretty amazing when you think about all the other miracles that Jesus does to individuals. Because almost all the time when Jesus heals someone, if there is something that he says to him, if the authors include that in the story, it's usually either one of two things. It's either if they have some sort of condition that has made them ritually, ceremonially unclean, like leprosy, or the woman in the next story that has had this issue of bleeding. Those are things listed in the law that make a person unclean. It's not necessarily a sin. Those are things that happen to them, but it makes them where they are ritually unclean and they cannot come into the temple. They're removed from the community until they can be able to cleanse themselves and become clean. Otherwise, they are cast out until that time is over. He tells them, go and show yourself to the priest. They'll know you're clean. To others, he'll do incredible things, like he also does in the next story of the girl getting raised from the dead. He tells her parents and the 3 disciples, Peter, James, and John, who've come in with him, he says, don't tell anybody about this. That's usually the things that he says. Either go show yourself to the priest so that you can be clean, so that you can resume activities and be back a part of the community, go back and be able to worship God in the temple, or don't tell anybody. But to this man, he stands alone in being the one that he says, hey, I want you to go and tell, because they're sending me away, and I'll honor that request, and they will experience the wrath of sending the light of the world away. But you go and tell your family. Go and make sure they know. And I know that you're going to tell more people than that, because the text even tells us that. Yeah, so the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him. And so he says, hey, your request is a good one, but I have a different plan for you. So I'm going to tell you no, but it's an act of grace, because I have greater things for you to do than follow me. So what is this? How does this kind of come home and get practical for us? You know, when my kids ask for something, as a father, in general, I want good things for my kids. I'll admit I'm not a great father all the time, and there are plenty of times where I'm very selfish and just say no, because that puts me out. But in general, my principle is, hey, I want good things for my kids. And so I want good things for them. Does that mean that I'm saying yes to them all the time? Absolutely not, right? We all know that. My kid comes and says, I would like to have a bowl of Skittles for breakfast. No. I'd like to stay up till midnight on a school night, says my 10-year-old. No. I'd like to have unfiltered access to the internet whenever I want it and look at anything I want. Like, no. But I say those no's because I love them, and I'm showing them grace by not letting them do what they ought not do, because they don't see, they don't understand, or they cannot appreciate the long-term effects of their decisions. And so I'm gonna answer their requests in a way that is what is good for them. In Matthew 7, Jesus says, which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? And so, our Father in heaven wants to give us good gifts, but good gifts that are viewed from his perspective about what is truly good. Because he understands, he has the long game in mind, and he has what is better interest in us. We want to satisfy our earthly urges. He wants to make us more like Jesus. We want what's good for today, or maybe even someday at retirement. He wants what's good for us in eternity. He sees things that we don't see. And so he actually calls us to ask, but to trust. Earlier in that same chapter, ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks the door will be opened. We can read that by itself and go, okay, whatever I ask, Jesus will give me. He says, no, I want you to ask. I want you to ask with sincerity, but you need to also trust me as your good Father, that I will give you the things that you need that are best for you. What will bring life to you? What will bring grace to your life? Because I love you, I don't want to give you things that are going to bring you to destruction. Because that's the expression of my wrath when I let people do what they ought not do that will lead to the destruction because they want to have nothing to do with me. I think one of the best examples of this is Jesus when he goes to the Garden of Gethsemane and prays. Going a little further, he fell to the ground and prayed that if possible, the hour might pass from him. Abba, Father, he said, everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me. Yet not what I will, but what you will. So Jesus, praying in the garden to his Father, he actually makes two requests there if you catch it. First, he says, let this cup pass before me. And this cup is a symbol of the wrath of God. In the book of Revelation, you see a lot of this cup metaphor where God's wrath is being poured out from these vessels, from these cups. And so it's an image of this. He says earlier in the prayer, or Matthew or Mark commentates and says that he asked that this hour might pass from him. This is the cup of suffering, the cup of wrath that he is about to have to drink. And so he's saying, can this cup pass before me? But his second request says, but not my will. He's asking this, I don't want my will, I want your will to be done, Father. Which might make us kind of go, whoa, how come Jesus has a different will than the Father? That doesn't seem right. He's God in the flesh. How come he's got this different will than the Father has in here? They have the same goal. Jesus and the Father and the Son, to seek and to save the lost. That is why he has come. Jesus has come in the flesh, and he has taken on the full weight of the human existence. And he feels the weight of that. He feels the weight of temptation. If we remember back when he started his ministry, 40 days in the wilderness, And Satan comes to tempt him. And he is tempted. It's not a lack of challenge. It is a difficult challenge. And he takes him through that, and he comes out of that. And what is the, I forget which gospel says, but it says, and the devil left him waiting for an opportune time. An opportune time showed up when Peter spoke out against Jesus when he was saying that, hey, the Son of Man will be crucified, and he will be handed over to be crucified. And Peter says, no, may it never be. That's not going to happen on my watch, Jesus. And Jesus turns to him because one of the opportune times has arisen, and he sees Satan, and he says, get behind me, Satan. You do not have in mind the things of God, but the things of men. He leaves again, and another opportune time has arisen, and that is now. On the eve of his crucifixion, on the eve of his passion, the temptation begins to give it up, to try to run away, to avoid the suffering that is going to come. And so he feels the weight of the pain, the weight of what he is about to go through. And this is not just the weight and pain of a physical suffering. There is a great spiritual suffering that we cannot even fathom, to bear the weight of the sin of the world, both past and present, for all those who would believe in future as well. That is a weight we cannot even understand. And so he's on the cusp of that, tempted to walk away. And so he asked Jesus, he asked the Father, let this cup pass before me. But they have the same goal, seeking to save the lost. So what Jesus is asking is saying, hey, I'm right here, God, and we're going here. If it's possible, can I not drink this cup to get to here? Is there another way that we can get to seeking and saving the lost? If there is, I would really like to take it. But you know what? Not what I want, but what you want. And what the Father wanted was, no, we're going this way. This is the way to seek and to save the lost. So he said, no, this cup won't pass, but yes, my will be done. And through that response, the greatest grace that ever has come to the world. So all that to just say simply this, that what Scripture I think calls us to, and I think we all know this, and so maybe this is just a reminder, but ask, seek, knock, beg, plead, but trust. Trust that your Father knows what is best. Trust that his yeses sometimes are exactly what we want, and they are wonderful. And trust that sometimes his no's are wonderful because they keep us from a path of destruction. Or they're wonderful because they will more glorify him, because they will take us down the path that he wants us to go in. Trust the one who crosses the sea to find a demon-possessed man just to speak life into him and to free him and to bring him and turn him into a missionary for him over on the other side of the sea. Trust the one who left the 99 to go after the one. Trust the one who left his throne in heaven, came to this earth, took on flesh, went to the cross, rose again for us. We don't have to understand. We can ask with sincerity, we can ask with passion, and we are called to do that. But we got to trust. Trust that he knows best. Trust that his plan will bring us the life that we truly all seek and desire. Let's pray. Father, I thank you for tonight, and I do thank you for your word that is, God, just so good for my soul, Lord. So good to put me in a place where I don't have to have it all figured out. And the reality is that more times than not, I probably want what is not what best for me. That I am just still a child in so many ways. And Lord, I have a good Father. You are my good Father. And that when we seek you with our whole heart, Lord, you will respond in a way that a good Father will. That when we ask for a fish, you won't give us a snake. When you ask for bread, you won't give us a stone. You will do what is right and what is good for us as you grow us and mature us, like I do my own children, mature us into what it means to be an adult, mature us to what it means to be true apprentices, followers of Jesus. And so, God, I pray that you would work that in our lives and help us all trust you. Whatever's going on in our lives, the prayers that we have, the sicknesses in our life, the people that are lost, that we're praying for their salvation, the broken relationships that we've done everything we can for on our end and just can't seem to be healed. Whatever it is, Lord, help us to seek you, but to trust you. Trust your timing, trust your plan, trust your strategy. Trust that you love us and you love those that we are praying for. We ask this all in your name. Amen. All right. We'll see you guys next time.